Understanding your income is perhaps one of the most important components of personal finance. I'm going to discuss different types of income and different perspectives on income, and then we'll dive into your income at work. We'll discuss how your employer views you and how you stand out in the marketplace. And we'll go through some questions to determine if your compensation is in line with your value. We'll then discuss strategies for getting a raise. My goal here is simple. I want to help you figure out how to make more money. Now, over my working life, I've had a range of jobs with many types of employers. I've worked at federal and state government jobs. I've worked in the private sector at small family-owned businesses, medium-sized companies, and global public companies. I worked minimum wage jobs as a stock boy in a department store and as a house painter. My first job out of college, I worked in Washington, D.C. for a federal agency, and I earned $13,000 a year. I went on to law school, and my first job as a lawyer in the private sector, I made $50,000, and then $70,000 at a different law firm. Years later, I was paid $150,000 a year at a legal publishing company. And at other firms, I had sales positions where my compensation exceeded $400,000. In several of these jobs, I was the highest compensated employee in the department. I've also started companies where I earned over $1 million a year, and I've had employees whom I've paid a range of salaries. I'm telling you this because I have personal experience as an employee at different levels and in a range of companies. I'm also keenly aware of how employers view their employees in terms of performance and compensation. And I'm excited to share with you some insights and suggestions how to increase your income. So let's get started with a concept about income that most working people don't understand. And that's active income versus passive income. Active income is simply income you get for services you perform. You do your job, you're paid a wage, salary, tips, commissions. But the key concept here is material participation. In other words, you work and you get paid. Passive income, on the other hand, is income that's earned from owning rental properties, limited partnerships, or other enterprises in which you are not actively involved. You are not punching the clock, sitting at a desk all day, or sweating your butt off. When you have passive income, the money comes to you regardless if you get out of bed in the morning. I bring this point up because when you develop your personal finance plan, you're going to want to model yourself off of those who become wealthy. And that will be to take a portion of your active income and you use it to acquire assets that produce passive income. Your long-term financial goal is very simple. You want to earn enough passive income to pay your bills and allow you to enjoy your life on your terms. This is what we call financial independence. And as you'll see later in the program, this isn't a far-fetched dream only for the 1%ers. It's an attainable goal for most people, and they can reach it in a surprisingly short period of time. And I'll discuss that in greater detail in other videos to come. But for now, I want to discuss the importance of perspective and thinking long-term. So you can change almost any aspect of your life when you change your perspective. Look, it's true in relationships, it's true in health, and it's true in money. Suppose you've been in a series of short-term relationships in which you had fun but no deep connection. And you felt like you finally arrived at a point in your life where you're looking for a life partner. All of a sudden, you're probably not going to be as attracted to the same type of person you had been before. Now you're looking for a person whom you have greater respect, more common interests, and someone who would be a great role model for your children. Basically, someone who you want to spend the rest of your life with. In health, perspective is often essential to change. If you've neglected your health your whole life and your doctor just warned you you better change your lifestyle or else you're going to have a heart attack, you'll now think very differently about your behavior. You'll be driven to changing your diet and start exercising. You'll want to see your kids grow up and enjoy retirement with your spouse. All of a sudden, spending 5 hours a day sitting on a couch watching TV and eating junk food isn't going to seem so appealing. And it's the same thing with money. When you get a paycheck or a bonus or a tax refund, your perspective of that money influences what you're going to do with it. If you're thinking short term, you'll buy stuff that'll give you an immediate rush. You might buy an expensive article of clothing or the latest electronic device. It's going to be a superficial purchase that doesn't help you improve your financial situation long term. When you start thinking long term, you're going to forego the immediate purchase and put the money towards something that's going to benefit you in a bigger way. For example, suppose you take your $5,000 tax refund and buy a 70-inch 4K ultra high-definition television. You can invite your friends over on Sunday to watch the game with you, and you'll take photos of you guys hanging out, and you'll post it on Facebook or Instagram. There'll be great shots with you and your friends, everyone smiling, beers in hand, in front of your brand new state-of-the-art $5,000 TV. you're going to get a ton of likes on Facebook, giving you even more positive feedback that your $5,000 purchase was a good decision. But suppose you did something really boring with that $5,000, something you'd feel uncomfortable posting on Facebook. You could use that money to pay off $5,000 balance on a credit card that's charging you 10% interest. You'll not only be eliminating some bad debt, but you'll be saving the interest that you would have paid on that money. So if it would have taken you a year to pay that off, you just saved yourself $500 in interest. Or look at it like you just made an additional $500. So compare this to the $5,000 TV. In a year, that same TV will probably drop in value and it's probably only worth $4,000. Or suppose you don't have any credit card debt and you use that money towards a purchase of your first rental property. How do you think that would feel knowing you're $5,000 closer to generating passive income? Well, ask anyone you know who has rental property and they'll tell you how great that would feel. We tend to use income to measure our success at work and we compare ourselves to others. But income by itself doesn't mean much without looking at expenses. If your expenses are well below your income, you're going to get ahead financially. If your expenses are more than what you bring home, you're on a bad path. And it's irrelevant if you make $40,000 a year or $400,000 a year. Now, I know it's hard for someone making $40,000 a year to imagine a person earning $400,000 a year who's struggling and who's stressed out about money. But it's true, believe me, I was one of those people. People change their standards as they make more money. It could be the nicer car, the nicer house, clothing, jewelry, or private school for their kids. The point is that your income should determine your spending, not the other way around. Too many of us get caught in a cycle where we feel we have to make more money just to keep up with the bills and from slipping further into debt. This is not a good place to be at. So again, the goal shouldn't be to make more money so you can survive, but rather you want to make more money so you can get ahead. Okay, so let's discuss active income, and let's look at it from your employer's perspective. Now, why is this important? Because this is important because your boss is the one deciding how much you're paid and whether you should be paid more. They control the money, so it makes sense to understand things from their perspective. As a general rule of thumb, an employee costs employers whatever the salary is plus an additional 25%. And the 25% will cover the employer's portion of Social Security, Medicare, state unemployment taxes, health insurance, obviously a huge expense, and retirement benefits. And there are other costs typically not included in the 25%. Office expenses tied to all employees like rent, furniture, office supplies and equipment, workers' comp insurance, and training. But using this as a guide, try to determine how much you cost your employer. So if your salary is $50,000 a year, add 25%, and you cost your employer $62,500 a year. Now ask yourself, what's your contribution in dollars to the organization? Now this is pretty easy to calculate if your job performance is directly tied to revenue, such as sales. You know what new accounts you brought in and what accounts you closed. If you're on a team that landed an account, think about the role you played on that team. So how important was your role in bringing the sale across the finish line? So were you the one who began the relationship and turned it into a lead? Or were you involved in nurturing the relationship so it became a lead and then transitioned into a customer? So the key here is you want to be honest with yourself and think about what would have happened if you weren't involved. Would it have closed anyway? Would it have closed at a much lower sales price? Let me give you an example. I once worked at a mid-sized law firm and I was a top biller among all the associates. I probably billed close to $400,000 that year, which was, I don't know, sometime in the early 90s. I think my salary was $60,000. At the end of the year, the partners invited me to lunch to discuss my stellar performance. I was pumped. This was going to be a big deal. I thought I was going to get a huge bonus and a raise. Instead, they offered me $2,000 as a bonus. I was stunned by the low number. I wasn't sure I heard them correctly. I made them repeat the number, and it made no sense to me. They were paying me $60,000 a year, or $75,000 with benefits, and I brought in $400,000. It didn't make sense. And then finally, the light bulb went off. Sure, I made the firm a lot of money, but if it wasn't me doing the billing, they could have found another eager young lawyer to do the same thing. The highest value a lawyer can bring to a firm is no different than any other business. Bring in great clients. The clients whom I serviced were the firm's clients. They weren't mine. The point here is that I had naively valued my services to the law firm at $400,000, but the partners valued my services at around $75,000. Who was right? Not me. They could have replaced me with another young attorney at close to what they were paying me. So if you aren't directly in sales, sometimes the best way to value your services to your employer is simply look at the marketplace. What's a reasonable salary that your employer could pay someone else to do your job? With most positions, there's a salary range, and think about how does your performance rate on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely amazing, and your bosses love you to death and they brag about you to everyone. That's a 10. And 1 is you're barely hanging on. So if you aren't a 10, but you were, how would things be different at work? What could you do to improve your performance so you're closer to a 10? And think about additional time you need to put into your job. Are there assignments you could take on that would show your commitment to the company? If it were your company, what would you do to improve things? Are any of these ideas feasible projects for you to initiate? If so, does it make sense to outline these ideas and present them to your boss? Depending upon the time of year your performance is reviewed, you should do these things well in advance of that date. At a lot of companies, performance reviews are done prior to next year's budget being finalized. So how do you rate compared to your colleagues at work? If you work with a bunch of slackers who are merely bidding their time until retirement, that is very different than working in a high energy environment at a growing company with lots of smart people looking to advance to the next level. So you should have an idea of what people in similar roles are being paid in your company. Now, I've never worked at a company where most people didn't have a pretty good idea of what their colleagues made. If you don't know, see if you can find out. You don't want to be underpaid compared to your colleagues. Sometimes other employees doing the same job are being paid much more because they've been on the job longer. And that may not seem fair to you, especially if you work harder and you do a better job. But discrepancies in pay may help your argument actually later on and get your salary increased if your argument's carefully crafted. Now, don't forget to factor in the qualitative aspects of your job. That is, the things about your job not tied directly to money. These things are often just as important as your paycheck. How's the company culture? Do you like the atmosphere at work? If you brought a friend to your workplace, what would they say about it? Sometimes we've been at a job so long, we don't even realize what it's like to outsiders. I once worked at a firm where the CEO was an absolute tyrant. When he was in the office, people tried to make themselves invisible. Because if the CEO was in a bad mood or less than enamored with you, watch out. Fortunately, I worked in a different part of the country and was rarely in the home office, but I felt bad for my colleagues who had to go there every day. On the other hand, if a CEO is a nice person, creative, ethical, fun-loving, the organization will reflect that. The company's culture will reflect the leadership of the organization. Bottom line, how do you feel about the company? Personally, I'd rather get paid a little bit less and work at a great company than to be paid more and dread going to the office every day. And do you like your colleagues? Recently, I worked with a group of guys that were great to be around. Everyone worked long, hard hours, but we thoroughly enjoyed each other's company. We had fun and we laughed a lot. When we started working together, I noticed that at least every few weeks, I laughed so hard that tears would be streaming down my face. On the other hand, I've had other jobs where I just didn't click with the people I worked with. I couldn't relate to their life experiences, I didn't share their interests or their values. And after a few months of dreading going to lunch with them, I started bringing my own lunch and eating at my desk. It's not fun working with people you can't stand. Another thing is, how's your location? Is your workplace located in an area that you like? For a lot of young people, it's important that their job is in a city where there's nightlife, so they can go out after work and grab a drink with friends. Some people, area is not important at all. They're just focusing on their commute, or they're focusing on parking. How easy is parking? Another issue related to location is the building itself. Do you enjoy the workspace? A well-designed office with a lot of natural light makes for happier and more productive employees. Another issue is your company financially healthy? Most people would rather work at a company that's stable and growing and happens to be in a solid industry. The atmosphere is better, and there are usually opportunities for advancement. It's not pleasant working at a company where the company is shrinking and it's a dying industry. My wife and I recently had dinner with a couple for the first time. The guy's an expert in a really obscure area of mechanical engineering, and he's been with the same company for 28 years. Unfortunately, the company isn't run well, and it serves an industry that isn't doing so good. And every year he's been there, for all 28 years, there's been layoffs every single year. So although he's worked at the same place for a long time, he's never really had job security. That's not a good situation. Does your company offer flexible work hours? For a lot of industries, it's no longer necessary to be tethered to a desk working 9 to 5 in the office. Employees can work from home or a coffee shop as long as they have an internet connection for their laptop or tablet and a phone. And flexible working hours and working from home programs can be a huge benefit to employees, especially those who have young children or elderly parents that they have to care for. Another factor is, how does your current job fit in with your long-term career goals? If you're in a job that provides great experience for your resume and terrific context in your field, all the other factors could be minor. So we've talked about the value you bring to your company from both your employer's perspective and your perspective. You've also thought about the non-financial aspects of the job. Now let's discuss whether or not you should ask for a raise. Determine if you're being compensated fairly by looking at these following 4 factors. Number 1, are your services in demand? If you have a skill or profession that's in high demand, you'll have no trouble finding another job if you leave where you are. My wife Jody is an RN, and we've lived in several places since we got married. She has never, ever had a problem finding a nursing position, not in New Jersey, Florida, or DC. If it's easy for you to find a job, you probably already know what the market rate is for your services. And by the way, the employers know that too. Is your compensation where it should be? If you aren't sure what your market rate is, do some research. There are plenty of great salary resources on the internet. You could also reach out to a headhunter to get their take on what a reasonable salary is. Factor 2, how does your salary compare to colleagues in your company? This is extremely relevant. Again, you should find out what the guy down the hall is doing the same job makes. If he's being paid much more and isn't a superstar compared to you, try to figure out why there's such a large discrepancy. The third factor is, what's your value to the company? As we discussed earlier, this is very relevant, especially if it's easy for you to determine the revenue you help bring into the company. But this also has to be offset by how easily replaceable you are. And 4, how do you value the non-monetary aspects of the job? This includes all the qualitative factors we just discussed. Company culture, location of your office space, people you work with, the industry, financial condition of your company. Consider all types of compensation. In addition to an increase in pay, there are other forms of compensation that may be more palatable to your employer, such as bonuses, commissions, profit sharing plan. And employers can reward employees with vacation getaways. And this is a common practice in sales. A lot of times companies will send out an early announcement to the spouse of the employee, telling the spouse and the employee about the upcoming trip. There's almost no limitation to what an employer can offer employees as reward. Some examples I've seen: a nicer office, a new job title, better health insurance, designated parking spot, additional training, or even a monthly stipend for a car lease. So after you think about your job performance and you do your analysis and you've decided to ask for a raise, here's what you need to do. You need to go into that meeting with your boss well prepared. This means you will have a good sense of the value that you bring to your company. Certainly include dollars if that can be estimated, but also how your contribution in terms of any new ideas you've proposed or implemented have improved the operations, efficiency, profitability, or even the company brand. Are you a manager in a company, and do you inspire and motivate others? This is all really important. And so I want you to prepare a list of all these accomplishments over the entire year and highlight the items that were beyond what was expected of you. I have a friend who's a senior vice president at a Fortune 50 company. He's an absolute superstar in everything he does at the company. He's not only intelligent, he excels in his leadership skills and his management skills. He's great at writing, presenting, and he's extremely likable. When he gets an idea, he runs with it. He takes initiative and accomplishes great things far outside the official responsibilities of his job description. For example, immediately following Hurricane Sandy, he organized a relief effort and within a remarkably short period of time led a caravan of relief vehicles from their corporate headquarters, and they drove 10 hours to the hardest hit areas of New York City. He didn't write a slew of emails waiting to get the appropriate approvals. He just took action. And the coolest part of the story, for me at least, is that after the first day of the relief efforts, he got a call from his CEO at 11:15 at night who had just seen the story on the news about what he was doing. The CEO was thrilled that my friend had taken that initiative. I could give you other examples of what he's done, but he's just great at this stuff. And I love him like a brother, but there's one area he falls short, and it drives me crazy. He doesn't take the time to write down his accomplishments. And I think that holds him back from advancing even more in his career. So my point here is that you probably do a lot of very noteworthy things throughout the year that are acknowledged and then forgotten. So try to get in the habit of writing them down on a regular basis so that it can be part of your presentation during your annual review. Your goal should be to have your boss acknowledge your accomplishments. Now listen, there's some things you don't want to mention in your meeting with your boss. Never discuss your personal financial needs. It doesn't matter to the company that your expenses have gone up because of some unanticipated home repair or medical bills or college tuition. It's obviously very important to you and your family, but there's nothing positive that comes out of mentioning that to your boss. And it could be viewed negatively. He may think that your financial woes are nothing compared to his. Or he may wonder, why aren't you doing a better job at managing your personal expenses? Another thing you shouldn't do is compare yourself to particular employees. While it's valuable for you to know what others are being paid, don't discuss this during your review. You'll put your boss on the defensive and he may start talking up the other employee, which won't do you any good. And then, this is most important, please, please, please rehearse. Write out all your points and rehearse what you're going to say. And it'd be great if you could actually practice this with a member of your family or a friend. If you do this, you'll go into the meeting feeling confident. As far as when to meet, if you're with a big company, they are likely to have a process in place that includes annual review meetings. But the ideal time would be 3 to 4 months before the budgets are set in the company. This way, your boss will have your additional compensation in mind when they're working on their department's budget. So before the meeting, prepare an outline of your accomplishments. After you discuss this with your boss, it's showtime. It's time to talk money. If you're going to ask for a specific amount, don't make it unreasonably high. Again, know your worth in the marketplace by doing your research. Or a different approach is ask your boss to tell you what they think is a fair raise. During the meeting, it's certainly likely that there's going to be some discussion or even disagreement, but that's good. It allows you to understand how he or she views your role in the company. You may even walk out of the meeting knowing for the first time that your boss doesn't think you're as good as you think you are. And you know what? That's great, because now you can start thinking about moving elsewhere in the company or even leaving the company altogether. Or maybe you discover that your boss thinks very highly of you, but he never expressed it before. So that wraps up this discussion about income. In this video, I introduced the concept of active versus passive income. And then we covered active income in detail. In the later programs, we're going to discuss ways to build passive income. We discussed the relationship between income and expenses. And from there, we jumped into your active income and what you can do to ensure you're getting paid as much as you should. As we develop the online program, there will be more blogs on this topic. So thanks for watching.